is if you look at the organizations that have done very well during COVID, they're all learning organizations.
Learning. And learning here is very interesting because it actually, I propose a way to how learning is being implemented, right? Because we always think about learning like, okay, I have formal trainings or I have cycle reviews. And it's not just about that, right? It's about creating an environment that is prone to learning, where the teams are safe to fail. And more specifically, they have space to share and learn from there, right? Because it's not about just making Scrum reviews, right? It's not about that. It's about people feeling safe. They have the space to share. So I have one CEO that asked me, okay, how I can start a learning culture? And I told him like, okay, it's not like a spark that you start a learning culture. You need to put a lot of work on that. But what you can do is start showing that you're vulnerable. So share yourself, a failure that you made, and what you learned with that, right? And if we can actually make, and when you actually make the link back to DA here, when we have one process goal that is really talking specifically about learning, that is evolved your way of working, that's based on the choices that DA provides you based on the context, right? So it's basically a conjunction of techniques and life cycles that you can use, again, based on the context, the choice that you make, right? And giving the freedom for the team to actually make that choice.
Yeah. And that's a great point. So this is the evolved way of working goal diagram. And so Disciplined Agile is all about giving you the freedom of choice and providing you with choices, and as well walking through the trade-offs of those choices. Yep. So it's interesting that like this goal diagram is focused at the team level. How does a team evolve their own way of working and learn over time? We also have a what we call a process blade called continuous improvement that is focused on how do we share improvements, how do we share learnings across the organization. So don't get me wrong, it's fantastic that teams are learning and improving over time, but the organization needs to learn as well, and that's a different set of skills and a different way of looking at it. So, but at the team levels and at the organization level, some of the principles of DA, one of them is to be awesome, to always be learning, always be improving. To optimize, another principle is to optimize flow. As you mentioned, one of the promises that we ask teams to make is to create psychological safety and to embrace diversity, and that's absolutely key to learning and improving, and frankly, just having an enjoyable time. My experiences over the years is the more diverse the team, the more effective we are, the better we are, the more fun we have. That's all great. So we want to be always improving our process, improving the way that we work, but also validating our learning. So, a couple times we've mentioned a technique called guided continuous improvement, GCI, and that's a validated learning technique for process improvement, where a team can experiment with techniques and find out what actually works for them. Because in DA, we don't believe in the term best practice at all. All practices, all strategies are contextual in nature. They may work very well for you, or they may be a phenomenally bad idea for you. So you got to try them out in the situation that you face. So I think there's a lot of great stuff in DA for enabling learning teams. And one of the things we talk about in our transformation strategy is that your real goal should be to become a learning organization, to actually learn how to learn, get better at getting better. And this is what all the organizations like Amazon and eBay and Google, all these really effective, really scary organizations, scary to compete against. This is what they do. They're learning organizations. They're constantly on the hunt to get better. This is why they're so good, is because they choose to get better all the time. And they're learning organizations. It's really as simple as that. And that needs to be your goal, because if you're not a learning organization, then if you're in agile limbo, basically, as you mentioned earlier, then you're not going to be able to compete against these other companies. And in the new normal for after COVID or during COVID, after COVID, it's going to be more competitive.
Exactly, more and more. One of the things that I used to say, like, people always love to say like COVID and this crisis teaches us a lot of things. What I used to tell people is like these concepts were already there before COVID, right? These were already important. What this crisis teach us is okay, enhance the problems that we have, right? And
Yep.
put that in our faces and say, okay, now you're giving value to that, but these things were already there before, right? So it's not like that COVID changed anything, but it enhanced the problems that we already had in our organizations, right?
Exactly. And what I find really interesting is if you look at the organizations that have done very well during COVID, they're all learning organizations. They
Exactly.
were doing well before, and they're doing even better now because they had the ability to pull ahead. They had the ability to sense and respond to what was actually going on. And the organizations that are struggling are the ones that really weren't learning organizations that were, effectively once again in agile limbo, and they were really sort of struggling. So it's interesting how the better organizations are really pulling ahead of the pack, and it's accelerated a lot of changes in our organizations. So it's going to be interesting over the next few years to see, how the marketplace, truly reacts, and who comes out on top and all this.
Yeah,
And
for
my money
sure.
would be on the learning organizations.
Yeah, and I just wanted to touch on a point here that you made, like when we say learning organizations, and learning is something really important, as I mentioned before, like for the CTO uh, that, that I just mentioned on the company, like for the learning culture. I think that, and I want to hear your opinion on that. Like this needs to be a leadership style too, right? If the leadership is not like keen to learning, keen to give space, keen to delegate things like that, this will never work, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So leaders have to lead by example. So they have to be, they have to be focused on learning themselves. But you also need to give your teams the opportunity to lead and to learn and to improve and to experiment and to try new things. This is what, in many ways psychological safety is all
Exactly.
about. This. Let's give these teams the breathing space to improve and to experiment. And sometimes your experiments will fail. And that's okay. But you've still got to, it's in many ways, it's like, if you've raised a child, you've got to, or, one or more children, you've got to give them space to learn, and you've got to step back and, let them make mistakes sometimes. That's how you learn. That's how you get better. We inherently know this as people. And in the way that we lead our lives. And I would invite people to do this at work as well. If this is the way you interact with your children, why aren't you interacting with your colleagues and playing by the same similar sets of rules that work? This works. If
Yeah.
anybody who's a parent knows this works.